the biggest challenge to living a beautiful life, finding true self-awareness, understanding God, achieving enlightenment, or experiencing liberation, however you define it, is the mind. Interestingly, Buddhists and Zen practitioners often speak of the mind in ways similar to how some people talk about God. By the time we're done, you'll see why they're actually talking about the same thing. The mind isn't what we think it is. It's not just thoughts or memories. It's actually a field of energy, a very high-frequency energy that our current instruments can't yet detect. This isn't unusual. For example, people didn't always know about infrared or ultraviolet light until tools were invented to measure them. Radio waves were once invisible to us too, until we created radios to pick them up. Our human senses and instruments are limited to certain frequencies of energy. But there are countless frequencies beyond what we can currently perceive. Physics acknowledges this. Scientists admit there are forms of energy they can't detect, yet because they don't have the tools to do so. Over time, as technology advances, we've uncovered more and more hidden phenomena. Similarly, the mind operates on a very high vibration, a mental plane that isn't made of physical matter like atoms. But even atoms themselves, as science has discovered, are not solid objects. They emerge from the quantum field, which is a deeper, subtler layer of reality. The quantum field is the foundation of everything physical. It's a field of energy that, when its vibrations slow down, gives rise to atoms. These atoms interact with forces like electromagnetism to create the material world we experience. However, the mental plane operates at an even higher vibration than the quantum level. It's not made of atoms or physical particles. Instead, it's a pure field of energy, existing in a state of extreme subtlety and harmony. Think of it like a still ocean. When the ocean is disturbed, ripples form. These ripples can interact, creating complex patterns that eventually become something recognizable. Similarly, the entire physical universe arises from the interactions of waves within energy fields. This isn't just philosophy, it's something modern science increasingly understands. The mental plane, then, is like a higher level energy field. We can't see or touch it, but we know it's there because we experience it directly through thoughts. Even a scientist questioning the existence of this field is using thoughts to do so. Where do those thoughts come from? They're not lying on the floor, nor can we physically grasp them. Yet they undeniably exist. The mental plane is real. It's just beyond what our current tools and senses can directly measure. Let's talk about how deeply we're lost in the mind. The funny thing is, we're so lost in it that we don't even realize we're there. It's like being in water all the time. If you've never been out of the water, if you've never seen anything but water, you wouldn't even know water exists. Fish don't know they're in water unless they jump out. And when they do, for that brief moment, they realize, hey, there's something else out here. It's the same with the mind. You don't know you're in it because you've never stepped outside of it. Most people don't even realize they're in the mind. They think their thoughts are who they are. But thoughts aren't you. They're just objects created by the mental plane, much like physical objects are created from quantum fields. The mental world, this world of thoughts and imagination that we all experience, comes from the energy of the mental plane. It's very subtle and operates at a much higher vibration than the physical world. One day, we'll probably develop tools that can detect it, Just like we now have tools to detect radio waves or ultraviolet light. For now, though, we can recognize that thoughts are real. They're not physical, but they have form. For example, if I ask you to imagine a boat, you can do it. Picture a big one, let's say the Queen Mary. Can you see it in your mind? You just created a form. That boat is now real in the mental plane. Some people, like psychics, claim to be able to see forms like that in others' minds. You've probably experienced something similar. Have you ever been sitting in a car with someone, and suddenly, without talking, you both start thinking about the same person, someone you haven't discussed in years? Maybe you say, "I was just thinking about Uncle George," and the other person says, "Me too." How does that happen? It's because thoughts are real. They're not just imaginary. They're actual things created in the mental plane, and sometimes others can pick up on them. But if we don't have scientific instruments to detect the mental plane yet, how do we know it's there? Because you already have an instrument for it. Your consciousness. Your awareness is sensitive enough to perceive the vibrations of the mental plane. And that's how you know thoughts exist. It's not so different from science. What used to be called metaphysics became physics once we developed tools to study it. Someday, the same might happen with the mind. For now, we understand that the mind is a field of energy, like a calm, still lake. When it vibrates, it creates patterns, and those patterns are what we experience as thoughts. Now, here's the key point. You are not the mind. You can use the mind, but the mind doesn't control itself. It's like a computer. It doesn't just do its own thing. Someone has to program it or tell it what to do. Even advanced AI operates because it was programmed in a certain way. The same goes for your mind. It can be completely empty, a still clear field of energy. But when you assert your will, you create thoughts in that field. Think back to the boat. You created that image in your mind. The mind didn't decide to create it. You did. That means there's something beyond the mind, something in you with the power to create. That something is called willpower. Willpower is your ability to shape the mind. It's the force that lets you generate thoughts, direct your attention, and make things happen. It's the part of you that can act independently of the mind. So, while the mind is an incredible tool, it's still just that, a tool. And like any tool, its value depends on how well it's used. If you take control of it, the possibilities are limitless. Can you move something in the physical world? Let's test it. Say, "I will move this object." You reach out, pick it up, and move it. It took energy, didn't it? But where did that energy come from? The object didn't float into the air on its own. You asserted your will, which activated your muscles, giving them the power to overcome the object's weight and resistance. So, the energy to move it started with your will. Now think about your thoughts. Those thoughts you willfully create. They're just like objects, but they exist in the mental plane. They're formed out of the subtle energy of that plane, shaped by your will. That's a tremendous power, isn't it? You're doing something that even scientists haven't figured out yet. They don't have tools to detect the mental plane, but you can not only sense it, you can manipulate it. You can consciously create within it. That's extraordinary. But here's the thing. To fully understand this, you have to step outside the mind. You are the conscious being, the indwelling awareness, that uses the mind as a tool and the physical body as another tool. Let's prove this with a simple example. You're going to move a physical object using only your mind. Ready? Lift your arm. You did it. You just moved a physical object using the power of your will. Your arm is a physical object, right? It has weight and exists under the same physical laws as everything else. So where is the motor, the engine, or the crane that lifted it? It wasn't external. It was your will that made it happen. This is a powerful realization. Your will can influence not just the physical plane, but also the mental plane. You can create thoughts as easily as you can move objects. For example, if I ask you to imagine a tree, you can immediately bring one into your mind. But what about the thoughts that seem to come on their own? The ones that trouble you? Thoughts about past events, regrets, or worries that pop up even when you don't want them? These kinds of thoughts are like habits in the physical plane. Imagine if you got into the habit of shaking your leg. It might keep going without you even thinking about it. It's the same with the mind. When you put enough energy into certain thoughts, they gain momentum and start recurring on their own. This happens because your will, at some point, gave power to those thoughts. They've become a habit, what we might call habit-formed will. But here's the good news. You're still the one in control, even if it doesn't feel like it. Those persistent thoughts are not happening to you. They're happening because of you. This doesn't mean you consciously choose to keep them around, but at some level, your will is involved. Freud and other psychologists have studied this phenomenon. They called it suppression, when thoughts or emotions are pushed down into the mind, where they stay. But why do only certain thoughts stick? When you drive down the road, you see lines on the pavement, trees, and other cars. Why don't those images stay in your mind? It's because they don't create a strong reaction within you. However, when a thought or experience triggers something uncomfortable, it creates ripples in the mental plane. Those ripples form patterns, forms, that linger because you, consciously or subconsciously, used your will to resist or suppress them. Have you ever tried to push away a thought you didn't like? The more you struggle, the more it seems to stick, right? That's because your will is still engaged with it. You're unknowingly keeping it alive. Will is an incredible force. It's the most supreme power within you. It can shape the physical world, the mental world, and even the emotional world. The key to freedom is realizing that you are the one holding these thoughts in place. With that awareness, you can start to release them. You don't have to fight them. You simply need to stop feeding them your energy. Once you truly let go, the thought patterns will dissolve, and you'll rediscover the immense power of your will to create a clear, peaceful mind. Have you ever tried to push away an emotion? Maybe it was something you didn't want to feel, so you tried to bury it. Or perhaps you've tried to hold on to a feeling because it was so wonderful, and you didn't want it to go. Have you ever had an emotion you disliked so much that you tried to stop thinking about it, only for your mind to keep bringing it back? I'm afraid of this, so I can't stop thinking about it. In all these situations, what's clear is that you have will, the power of your consciousness. Will is the ability to engage with and influence your inner experiences. You can push away thoughts, cling to them, embrace emotions, or reject them. This ability to interact with your mental and emotional states shows that there's a part of you that's separate from them. Freud and others understood this to some degree. They realized that the mind can hold on to things, and that buried thoughts or emotions, those you suppress, can cause problems. If you use your energy to keep these things buried, they don't just disappear. Instead, they fester in the background, leading to inner conflict or imbalance. You can become overwhelmed by disturbing, obsessive, or out of balance thoughts and emotions. But here's the important question. Who pushed those thoughts or feelings down in the first place? Freud might say it was the ego, but what is the ego? The ego isn't some separate entity. It's simply a structure made up of your thoughts, your likes, dislikes, fears, and preferences. It's a collection of ideas that you built inside your mind. Your ego is unique to you. It's different from everyone else's. And it even changes over time. The ego you had yesterday isn't the same as the one you have today, because your experiences are constantly shaping it. New things come into your mind, and you, the being inside, react to them. Let's be clear about this. You are not your thoughts, and you are not your emotions. You are the one who experiences them. So who are you then? Are you in there? Let's test it. Close your eyes and ask yourself, am I in here? How do you know? You just do. It's like when Moses asked God for his name at the burning bush, and God said, I am that I am. You exist because you exist. You don't need to prove it, you just know. This you has the power of will. It's the part of you that can manipulate the mental and emotional planes. Let's talk about those planes for a moment. Your thoughts and emotions are not the same thing. Thoughts are mental creations. They can be visual or vocal. For example, your mind might say, why did I do that? I can't believe this is happening. Maybe I should call someone about this. These are vocal thoughts, the voice in your head. Your mind can also create visual thoughts, like when you imagine a scene or a picture. But emotions are different. If I asked you to point to where your thoughts are, you'd probably gesture toward your head. If I asked where your emotions are, you'd point to your heart. That's because emotions come from a different vibration field, the emotional plane. So, there's the mental plane where your thoughts are formed, and the emotional plane where your feelings arise. Both are subtle fields of energy, and your consciousness can pick up on both of them. But you're not limited to just those two. You also interact with the physical plane, the tangible, material world. Your consciousness perceives and influences all these planes, the physical, the mental, and the emotional. Consciousness is the supreme force that ties everything together. It is the I am that I am. It's the awareness behind everything you experience. You're the one who looks out through your eyes. You're the one who feels hurt when someone says something unkind. You're the one who thinks, I'll do something about this. No matter what plane you're interacting with, physical, mental, or emotional, it's always the same you experiencing it. That awareness, that I in you, is constant. It's not your thoughts, emotions, or even your body. It's something deeper, something eternal. The question isn't whether you exist. It's whether you remember who you truly are. Throughout your life, things happen to you. Events come and go, like wind passing through. Most of them just move along, but some stick with you because they made you uncomfortable. You didn't want to face them, so you pushed them away. That's what suppression is. It didn't happen on its own. You made a choice. You, the conscious being inside, used your will to say, I don't want this. Not now. Not ever. Sometimes you even argue with yourself about it before dealing with the actual person or situation. How often have you had imaginary conversations in your head, before or after speaking to someone? You rehearse what you'll say or replay what happened, but you never actually address it. That's what it means to wake up and notice what's really going on inside your mind. It's just energy flowing through thoughts. But when you resist those thoughts, you create patterns. Sigmund Freud called it suppression, repression, or denial. It's like saying, I don't want to think about this. But the thought doesn't disappear. It's there because it was created. Something happened, words were said, and you experienced it. But instead of letting it move through, you pushed it away. And who does the pushing? You. Suppression doesn't just happen by magic. It's an act of will. Your will. But here's the catch. If you keep suppressing things over and over, it becomes automatic. At first, it's intentional, but eventually it turns into a habit, like tapping your foot or chewing gum. It becomes a mental habit, something your subconscious does without you even realizing it. For example, maybe something upsetting happened when you were a child, like someone taking away your favorite toy. You suppressed how that made you feel. Now, years later, the memory is buried, but the emotions are still there, hidden in your subconscious. How do we know this? Because when people dig deep enough, like in therapy, those buried feelings surface. They feel uncomfortable, maybe even start crying, without fully understanding why. That's the result of suppression. Something happened when you were young, and now, decades later, is still affecting you. Freud was onto something with this. But here's the deeper truth. You are the one who suppressed it. It's not happening to you passively. You're actively doing it, whether you realize it or not. No one else is in there. No mum, dad, or anyone else. Even the superego Freud talked about, the voice that says, you should do this or don't do that, it's just a collection of thoughts you absorbed from others. Maybe your mother told you to behave a certain way, and you held on to those words. Or maybe part of you wants to rebel, saying, I don't care what they said. I'll do what I want. That's the animalistic, instinctive side of your mind. Then there's your ego, which is a story you've built about yourself based on all these thoughts. It says, I'm this kind of person. I went through this. I achieved that. But that's not who you really are. The ego is just a concept, a mental construct. You're not the thoughts in your head or the roles you play. You're the conscious being watching it all unfold. Notice how your mind talks to itself. Oh no, I can't believe I did that. I feel so embarrassed. What's wrong with me? Then another voice. Maybe the superego jumps in. What would your mum think? You shouldn't have done that. You know better. It's like a battle of thoughts. But at the end of the day, they're just that. Thoughts. They only stay alive because you give them energy. Without your will feeding them, they would fade away. There's no glue holding them in place except the power you give them. Letting go means realizing that you don't have to hold on to these patterns anymore. You're not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. You have the power to decide when to push things away. And at first, it feels like you're in control. But over time, pushing things away becomes a habit. You get used to saying, I don't like this, or this makes me uncomfortable. And before you know it, your mind is full of resistance. You've turned your own mind into a battlefield. All those thoughts, feelings, and situations you've tried to avoid, they're still there because you never dealt with them. Instead of freeing yourself, you've trapped yourself. But here's the key. Everything you're experiencing, the energy, the emotions, the thoughts, they're all part of this field of life that's constantly moving. One day, you wake up and realize something powerful. You are not your mind. Your mind isn't in charge of you. You created your mind. You're the one who decided, I don't like this, or this is too much. You built those walls. And guess what? The more you push something away, the more it sticks. If you hate it so much, why are you holding on to it? Why not just let it go? Think about it. That thing you don't like? It's over. The childhood hurt, the heartbreak, the betrayal, they're all in the past. So why do you keep dragging them around? Let them go. Say goodbye. It's done. But here's the truth. To truly let something go, you have to face it. You have to experience it, feel it, see it for what it is. And yes, that's uncomfortable. No one likes pain, but pain is real. It vibrates inside you. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It just makes it a permanent part of your life. Until you deal with it, it'll stay with you. And remember, your mind is incredible. It's not just a battlefield of emotions, it's a masterpiece. Look at what the human mind has achieved. Airplanes, computers, spaceships, breathtaking art. Your mind is a supercomputer, more brilliant than anything it has ever created. Think about that. The mind that built artificial intelligence, the mind that invented the microchip. It's the same type of mind you have. Genius after genius, human minds have built on each other, unlocking the impossible. You're part of that legacy. Your mind isn't just smart, it's a miracle. And your body? It's another miracle entirely. Look at it. 25 trillion cells working together every moment of your life. Did you make your own heart? Did you grow your own eyes or lungs? Did you stretch yourself from a tiny baby to an adult? No. Your body did all of that on its own, and you didn't even have to think about it. Every organ, every function, perfectly coordinated. That's the power of the energy field you're part of. Respect it, honor it, be in awe of it. When you understand this, you'll see that your mind and body are not separate from the greatness of humanity. The same energy that built statues, created AI, and painted masterpieces flows through you. Einstein, Newton, Da Vinci. They weren't superhuman. They were human, just like you. You have the same creative potential, the same brilliance within you. The human mind, your mind, is a limitless field of energy capable of achieving greatness. So stop doubting it. Stop fighting it. Start respecting it. You have a mind. It's extraordinary, beyond what you realize. You don't even know how powerful it really is. Why not? Because over the years, you've cluttered it with junk. You've piled on things like your ego, your likes and dislikes, your fears, anxieties, and suppressed emotions. All of it garbage. You've made your mind a chaotic mess. Think about this. How often do you worry? Worry is nothing but a function of your mind, not reality. Reality exists only in the present moment, right now. Worrying, on the other hand, is about imagining what might happen in the future. How often does what you worry about actually happen? Almost never. And yet, you let your mind spin those imaginary scenarios. Guess what? That's you doing it. Nobody else. You're the one in control of your mind, yet you've turned it into this tangled mess. Your thoughts, your focus, your willpower, they're all tied up in this knot of mental clutter. Imagine trying to solve a major problem or take a big test while your mind is weighed down by heartbreak, loss, or fear. Now imagine solving that same problem or taking that test after a moment of peace, clarity, or joy. Would your results be different? Of course they would. That's the power of the mind. When it's clear, it's incredible. But when it's tangled up in garbage, you're dragging yourself down. Here's what's happening. Your mind is an open, empty field of energy by nature, but it's now full of clutter from outside experiences. Everything you've seen, heard, or felt has entered your mind through your senses and left an imprint. You don't see the world as it is. You see it as your mind processes it. Light bounces off objects, enters your eyes, and is processed in your brain. What you're really seeing happens inside your mind. That's science. And here's where you come in. You, the conscious part of you, decide what to accept and what to reject. You experience something, and if you don't like it, you push it away. You don't want to feel that pain or discomfort, so you suppress it. That suppression doesn't make it disappear. It gets stored in your subconscious, creating the junk that clogs up your mind. But it's not just the bad stuff. Even the good experiences you couldn't handle added to the clutter. You see a breathtaking sunset, and instead of simply experiencing its beauty, you think, how can I have this moment forever? Maybe I'll buy a house here so I can see this every day. You couldn't handle just letting it be. Whether it's joy or pain, you try to hold on to it, control it, or push it away. And that's how your mind gets filled with all this stuff. Your thoughts today are shaped by everything you've accumulated over time. The experiences you couldn't process in the moment, the ones you rejected or clung to, are now driving your mental chatter. You've built a mind full of clutter because you couldn't just let life flow. Instead, you've been reacting, resisting, or grasping at it all. That's why your mind feels heavy, chaotic, and sometimes out of control. But remember, you are the one in there. You have the power to clear it out and reclaim its full potential. All it takes is recognizing the clutter and choosing to let go. You've been holding on to your likes and dislikes for so long that they've become a pattern in your mind. You think that's just who you are, but it's not. Those are just habits and thoughts you've stored in your mind. Your mind itself is empty, like a blank canvas. But over time, you've filled it up with all this clutter, preferences, fears, memories, and judgments. It's like you've stuffed your mind full of junk, but the rest of your mind, the open, limitless part, is still there, waiting for you. You see, your mind has the ability to think beyond all this noise. It can explore incredible things, galaxies, the mysteries of the universe, and ideas far beyond your everyday experiences. I encourage you to stretch your mind, to dive into those big thoughts, to think about the quantum field or the vastness of existence. Step out of the small personal mind that's obsessed with your little world. But here's the problem. You don't. Why? Because your personal mind is so distracting. Even if you meditate and reach a beautiful state of calm, how long does it take before all that noise comes rushing back? Suddenly, you're worrying again. You're obsessing over something Aria said 5 years ago. Here's the thing. That's stuff you've built in your mind. It's like you handpicked it to distract yourself. If I took your mind and placed it in mine, it wouldn't bother me at all. Why? Because I wouldn't care about Sally or what happened 5 years ago. But for you, it's different. You collected these thoughts, these emotions, and now they control you because you've made them yours. It's funny when you think about it. You've created this trap for yourself. All that mental clutter, that's what you call your personal mind. It's the mental space you built because you couldn't handle life as it was happening. But now, that very mind keeps you from truly experiencing life as it is. So here's the deeper question. What's your relationship with your mind? Are you so tied to it that you think it is you? When you say, I, you're not talking about the real you. You're talking about the patterns in your mind. You've become so attached to them that you can't even find the deeper self, the one who is aware of it all. That deeper self is the experiencer, the one who is conscious, the one who notices everything happening. It's like you're the user of a computer. Your mind and emotions are the software, and your senses are the input devices. You're the person sitting behind the screen, experiencing it all. But here's the problem. The mind is so noisy, so distracting that you get lost in it. Most people never step back to see the difference. They think their mind's chatter is who they are. You've heard it before. Mindfulness, witness consciousness. What do these mean? They're about noticing that you are not your mind. You're the one observing your mind. For example, your mind might say, I don't want to go to that event. What if my ex is there? That will be so awkward. And while your mind is spinning, you, your true self, are sitting in the background, watching all this happen. The problem is, you're so caught up in the noise that you forget to step back. You've stared at your thoughts for so long, with so much attention, that you've started to think, this is me. But it's not. That's just your mind talking. It's not your soul. It's not your consciousness. And when you can start to notice the difference, when you can observe your thoughts instead of identifying with them, that's when you begin to wake up. That's when you start to realize you're so much more than the endless chatter in your head. Have you ever stopped and really watched your mind? That's what's called witness consciousness. It's when you observe your thoughts instead of getting caught up in them or thinking you are them. But why do we mistake ourselves for our minds? Because we've gotten too close. So close that we've lost our perspective. Your consciousness, the real you, has no frame of reference beyond the mind because you're sitting so deep inside it. You're staring at your thoughts so completely, so constantly, that they've become your whole reality. But here's the truth. You're not your mind. You're the consciousness experiencing the mind. That's what spirituality is all about, helping you step back and reconnect with that deeper self. It's not about abandoning your mind or refusing to use it. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Some of the greatest inventors, artists, and creators weren't stuck in their minds. They tapped into something deeper. Inspiration and intuition don't come from the mind. They come from beyond it. They come from the soul, from consciousness itself. Think about Beethoven. The masterpieces he created didn't originate in his logical mind. They were like gifts flowing through him, passing into his mind from a deeper place. Creativity, genius. It all arises when you move beyond the personal mind. But most of us don't see it that way. We're so attached to staring at the little voice in our heads, the one that keeps running like a computer program. This program, the ego, loops endlessly about your little world. It's full of likes, dislikes, beliefs, and judgments, all built from your past experiences. And here's the thing. That personal mind, that ego, is tiny. It's so small compared to the vastness of your consciousness. Your mind is expansive, infinitely so. Just like the physical universe has no end, your mind can think about anything. Don't believe me? Right now, imagine a dog. Now a cat. Now. Think about the rings of Saturn or a galaxy so far away you can barely comprehend it. Your mind can go anywhere. Now, think about astronauts. When they leave Earth and look back at it from space, they experience something called the overview effect. They see the planet as a fragile little ball floating in the vastness of the cosmos, and it changes them. Their perspective shifts. Suddenly, The petty concerns of daily life seem insignificant. They realize how interconnected everything is, and their minds open to bigger, deeper truths. When that happens, their personal mind, the little I that obsesses over small worries, gets scattered for a while. They wake up to the vastness of existence. You just did something similar by imagining those 1.3 million Earths inside the sun. For a moment, you stepped out of your small personal mind and into something bigger. You felt the vastness, didn't you? That's the power of stepping back and realizing that you are not your mind. You are the consciousness that can explore the entire universe. There are about 300 billion stars in your galaxy. 300 billion! Imagine trying to count them, 1 star per second. Someone once worked out how long it would take. It would take over 7.5 lifetimes, maybe more. That's how vast your galaxy is. Now think about it. Your mind can comprehend that. You can imagine that incredible number and hold it in your thoughts. You can let your mind wander through the stars, visualizing a galaxy so enormous it boggles the imagination. But instead of thinking about that, you're sitting here worrying about things like, does she like me? Should I say something? No, I'll be embarrassed. What if I drop something? Oh no, there's a zit on my face. I don't want to go anywhere now. Seriously. You're using the same mind capable of contemplating the vastness of the universe to obsess over tiny, fleeting worries like that. That's a waste of something amazing. So why is your mind so distracted? Because you've stored inside it the things that bother you most. Your personal mind, your ego, is like a program that keeps running, full of these stored experiences. Some of these experiences stuck with you, because you liked them so much you wanted to repeat them. Others stuck because you disliked them so much you wanted to avoid them forever. But here's the thing, liking and disliking are the same thing. Both are distractions. They trap your attention. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone walks up to you and says, "You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen. You take my breath away." What happens? You can't just smile, say, "Wow, what a nice moment," and move on. No, you hold on to it. You want to know who they are, how to contact them. Or you rush to tell someone what they said. That's what it means to not handle an experience. You couldn't just let it flow through you. You clung to it. And the same thing happens with negative experiences. If someone insulted you instead, you'd obsess over that too. You'd replay the moment, maybe even tell others about it. Whether it's praise or criticism, you get stuck on it. You can't let it pass through and move on to the next moment. Instead, you hold on, creating patterns in your mind that distract you and pull you away from the present. And here's the real issue. You've become addicted to these patterns. You've held on to them so tightly that you've started to identify with them. When someone asks, "Who are you?" you might answer, "I'm Ben's wife, I'm the mother of 2, I'm an accountant, and I played Dorothy in the 5th grade." But those are just experiences. They're not who you are. If you hadn't married Ben, would you still exist? Of course. If you didn't play Dorothy, would you still be here? Absolutely. But your mind clings to those things, as if they define you. The truth is, those are just thoughts. Tiny little patterns running in a very small part of your mind. And the reality of who you are is so much bigger than that. Your mind has the capacity to think about galaxies, to contemplate the vastness of space, to dream of things beyond your experiences. Yet, instead of reaching for that greatness, you stay trapped in the little world of ego, replaying memories, fears, and desires over and over again. What a waste of an extraordinary mind. I like to explain things in a way that your mind can actually reach out and touch. Let's start simple. There are 300 billion stars in your galaxy. That's a fascinating fact. But it probably doesn't stir much emotion in you, right? Here's a way to visualize it. Imagine a beam of light. If I release it above the Earth in just 1 second, it will circle the entire globe 7.5 times. That's the speed of light. Mind-blowing, isn't it? Now, imagine that beam of light traveling at that speed every second, non-stop, for 4.3 years. Only then would it reach the next closest star. Can you feel that? Can your mind touch that distance? Of course it can. Your mind has the power to imagine, to explore, to live in the vastness of a world like that. But now look at the world you actually live in. Your thoughts, instead of stretching to the stars, are caught up in the tiny, repetitive patterns of your past experiences. Everyone has their share of memories. But here's the question. How many moments have you missed while holding on to just one? Think about it. Right now, countless things are happening all around you. Experiences, moments, events. And yet, you're stuck on something that happened 4 or 5 years ago. You've missed so much because you've been so focused on that one thing. But it's worse than that. You've let those few moments define you. You've built your identity around them, turning them into the foundation of who you think you are. That's what you've done with this incredible tool, your mind. You've taken its vast potential and locked it into a loop of old experiences and thoughts. Why? Because you couldn't handle something that happened. Maybe it was a good moment you didn't want to let go of, or maybe it was a bad one you couldn't accept. Either way, you held on to it, and in doing so, you trapped yourself. I'm saying this on purpose because I want you to see how great your mind really is. Look at the kind of concepts you can imagine. The speed of light, stars billions of miles away, the vastness of the universe. Now compare that to the things you let consume your thoughts. If I asked you, how important are those experiences you've had? The right answer would be, they're nothing. Statistically, they're insignificant. They're just tiny blips in the infinite possibilities of your life. But you've taken these little blips and used them to create an entire narrative of who you are. It's time to let that go. Your mind is meant for greater things. Stop living in the narrow world of your personal experiences and start using your mind for what it was built to do. Explore, imagine, and connect with something far bigger than yourself. There's a concept called statistically insignificant. It perfectly describes your experiences. Think about it. You had one single experience, but while that was happening, 700 million zillion other things were also going on in the universe. Yet, what did you do? You grabbed that one little moment, the one you happened to be standing in front of, and you made it a big deal. You took that experience and made your entire life about it. You think your experiences are the most important thing in the entire universe, don't you? Newsflash, they're not. They're just random things that happened. And you happened to be there when they did. That's all. Wake up to the reality of it. Here's the truth. You are listening to the silliest thing in the world. The collection of learned experiences stored in your mind. They're arbitrary. They're not some grand design. They just happened. And now you've built your entire sense of self around them. How often do we hear this? This is just how I am. I've always been like this. Oh, really? So the things you experienced when you were 5 years old are still running your life today. I've never liked that. And you're proud of that. I've never liked people who do this or act that way. Do you see how ridiculous it sounds? You're holding on to patterns and preferences, like they define who you are. This is why we need to talk about your relationship with your mind, because you've never really paid attention to it. Think about it. If your mind tells you to jump, you jump. If your mind tells you, I don't like this, you walk away. Here's an example. You get married on a whim in Vegas. You're madly in love in the moment. But the next morning, you wake up, look over, and your mind says, what did I do? Who is this person? Can that happen? Of course it can. That's how unreliable your mind is. Now, do you see why I keep talking about this? You're not your mind. Not a single thought, opinion, like, or dislike that your mind throws at you is actually you. These are just things you've collected and stored in this field of energy called the mind. And here's the thing. You're addicted to staring at this mental junk. So addicted, in fact, that you've started to believe it's you. You've bought into this idea that I am my mind, I am my ego. But let's get real for a second. Psychology defines the ego as your self-concept. Not your true self, but a concept, an idea you've made up in your mind about who you think you are. What is a concept? Something imagined, something created. That's all your ego is, a mental construct. And here's the crazy part. It's so fragile that it can change in an instant. Something as simple as one new experience or someone's opinion can shift it completely. And yet, there are 8.3 billion people on this planet, each with their own unique set of experiences. That means there are 8.3 billion different egos, each built from a random, insignificant collection of moments. So, why are you so attached to yours? Why are you so convinced that this bundle of thoughts and preferences defines you? It's time to wake up. You are not your mind. You are something much greater, much deeper, and far more meaningful than the mental clutter you've been staring at. Do you have to live like this? Constantly tangled up in every thought your mind throws at you? Absolutely not. You don't have to live like that. Do you have to dig through every single experience you've ever had, trying to figure out which ones you couldn't let go of? No way. You'd be here forever. Imagine it's like dealing with a bad financial advisor. Maybe you listened to one a few years back, trusted their advice, and ended up losing all your savings. Now, does that mean you need to confront them, scream at them, or dwell on how they screwed you over? Of course not. All you have to do is stop listening to them. The next time they come around with their great investment advice, just laugh it off and put your attention somewhere else. That's it. It's not about stopping them from talking. It's about you deciding not to listen. This is the exact same relationship you need to have with your mind. Your personal mind is always talking, always chattering, always offering its unsolicited advice. But guess what? You don't have to listen to it. Here's an example. Let's say you're happily married, and one day someone at work says something like, well, I was happy in my marriage once too, but then they changed. Suddenly, your mind starts whispering, what if that happens to me? Maybe I should prepare for the worst. Next thing you know, you're considering doing something insane, like secretly dating someone else, just in case your marriage falls apart. Don't tell me the mind doesn't pull stunts like this. It absolutely does. And here's another classic. I'm so unhappy since they left me. I'll never find anyone else. Life is meaningless. That's not you talking. That's your mind. You're not depressed. You're staring at a depressed mind. The same you that watches your mind say, "She loves me. I'm the happiest I've ever been," is the same you that watches it say, "She left me. Nobody will ever love me again. I don't even want to live." Your mind is all over the place, and you're just sitting there, watching it like it's some kind of authority. Here's the truth. You need to learn how to stop identifying with your mind. You don't have to fight with it. You don't have to shut it up. You don't have to take it seriously. Just because it's talking doesn't mean you have to listen. This is what spirituality boils down to. Learning how to separate yourself from your mind. You can still hear it, but not because it's in charge. Not because you believe it's some wise guru with all the answers. Your mind is. The sum total of your learned experiences adds up to nothing. Zero. You were so busy clinging to one tiny moment that you missed everything else happening around you. So guess what? You don't know squat. But the mind still loves to argue, doesn't it? Well, I know this for a fact. Women who are really pretty aren't nice. Oh, really? And where did you get that wisdom? High school. I dated someone blonde and she wasn't nice. Wow. One experience. And now you think you've figured out the truth about the entire world. Here's the thing. At the same time that one little high school experience was happening, 800 zillion other things were going on. If you'd been open to those, you wouldn't be thinking the way you do now. But instead, you latched onto one moment, built an entire belief system around it, and now you call it truth. Why would you listen to thoughts like that? They don't know anything. You don't need to argue with your mind, shout at it, or wrestle it into submission. Just don't give it your attention. Here's the reality. The mind only knows a tiny fragment of life. And guess what? That's true for everyone's mind. Every single person walking around is just listening to the small, limited stories their own mind has made up. Nobody's mind knows the truth. The only truth worth knowing is this. Your mind doesn't know squat, and it never will. So why waste another second believing it? Step back, let it ramble, and go live your life beyond the noise. If your ego is just the sum of all your learned experiences, then what does that add up to? Think about it. 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, it's still 0. Why? Because every single moment you've lived, you were only aware of one tiny slice of reality, while missing 700 billion trillion other things happening all around you. That's why the sum of your learned experiences is statistically insignificant. It can't possibly know much of anything. But what do we say? I read a book about it. Oh, really? How many books didn't you read? How many perspectives, ideas, and experiences are out there that you never encountered? What about all the infinitely bigger things happening that you've never even imagined? It's funny when you think about it, isn't it? You've built your identity on such a tiny, incomplete story. Wake up. This is the key to spiritual growth. You don't need to fight with your mind, argue about being right or wrong, or create some new self-image like, "I'm spiritual, I've conquered my mind." Who's even saying that? Your mind. True awakening is simple. It's just realizing, wow, look at that thing talking in my head. Look how noisy it is, how powerful it can seem. It's not easy to ignore because it's made out of your most intense experiences, the ones that hurt the most, or maybe felt the best. Those moments left a mark, and now they pull you in, over and over again. Think about it. If you're remembering the nicest thing that's ever happened to you, where's your focus? Are you out exploring the universe? Are you solving big problems, creating new things? No, you're just sitting there replaying that one moment. And when it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, it's even worse. How often do you dwell on the pain, reliving it like it's happening all over again? You don't even need anyone to bring it up. You're replaying it on loop in your head like an addiction. Let's be honest. If someone said something hurtful to you, don't act like it's never happened. How many times do you think about it afterward? Not once, not twice, but endlessly. Days, weeks, months later, you're still letting it live rent-free in your mind. Wake up. You're misusing the most incredible tool you have. Your mind. Your mind is capable of extraordinary things. But instead of using it to dream, create, or explore, you're carving it up with the worst moments of your life. You wouldn't take a razor to your skin, but look at what you're doing to your mind. Every painful memory, every hurtful comment, every regret, you've stuffed it all into your mind and let it become the foundation of how you think. It's no wonder your mind feels heavy and stuck. But there's good news. You don't have to stay tethered to all that. As you learn to let go, you'll discover what it means to truly release your mind. That's what freedom is. Untethering your mind. Suddenly, it's no longer weighed down. It's light, clear, and capable. Your mind can start to think freely, to imagine, to create, to love without fear. That's what it was always meant to do. And this isn't just about the mind, it's about the emotional plane too. Let me ask you, have you ever been hurt emotionally? Of course you have. Everyone has. And are you scared of being hurt again? Of course you are. That fear doesn't just sit quietly, it spills into everything. It affects your relationships, your choices, your behavior. It colors how you see the world every single day. Why? Because you've stored all that pain, all that fear inside your heart. Your heart, just like your mind, is beautiful. But instead of letting it stay open and free, you've filled it with old wounds. And now you're scared to let it open again. As you learn to let go of the pain you've stored, both in your mind and your heart, you'll discover something amazing. You'll find that they were never meant to hold on to all that. They were meant to flow, to experience, to move freely through life. That's when you'll finally know what it means to untether yourself from your thoughts, your fears, your past. That's when you'll truly be free. Your heart has an amazing ability to feel love and be inspired. Not everyone's heart operates this way, but yours can. So, why do most people feel something else? The answer is fear. Lots of fear. Most people's hearts are full of fear. I'm scared of getting hurt. I'm scared she won't like me. I'm scared to try this or that. Once in a while, feelings like love break through, but for many, fear dominates. Why? Because they've stored fear inside their hearts and minds, holding on to every painful or upsetting experience. Let go of that fear. That's what spirituality is really about, freeing yourself. It's not about gurus, meditation, or being nice. It's not about wearing white clothes or thinking, I didn't meditate enough today. True spirituality is about noticing what your mind is doing and realizing it's not always healthy. If your mind is full of negative thoughts and you let it control you by constantly trying to make yourself feel better, then your mind is in charge. But that's not what life is about. It's not about getting what you want or avoiding what you don't want. Your mind tricks you into thinking you'll only be okay if it gets its way. But does getting what it wants really bring deep joy? Does it open your heart? No, it keeps you stuck in a small, limited perspective. That's why liberation is so important. Liberation doesn't mean fighting your mind or trying to destroy your ego. It means finding peace within yourself, even with the ego present. Over time, the ego will lose its power because you're no longer feeding it. What feeds the ego? Things like anger, resentment, or replaying hurtful conversations in your head. For example, when someone says something you don't like, instead of holding on to the anger, imagine responding with kindness. I'm sorry you weren't feeling good when you said that. Don't worry about it. Wouldn't life be better if we all reacted this way? To grow, you need to stop being addicted to the small personal thoughts of your mind. Techniques like positive thinking can help. Why? Because the mind naturally leans toward negativity. If it didn't, we wouldn't need tools like positive thinking. The reason your mind is negative is that it's full of the negative experiences you've stored. But you can train your mind to see things differently. Take something as simple as a hot day. Instead of complaining about the heat, try thinking, I'm feeling the warmth of the sun, which is 93 million miles away. I'm so close to a star. Isn't that incredible? Turning a negative thought into a positive one can completely change your experience. Over time, this practice will set you free from the grip of negativity, and even from needing to force positivity. Why? Because as you let go, energy and joy will naturally rise up inside you. You'll discover a deeper part of yourself, a beautiful, vibrant being that has been suppressed by fear and negativity. When this happens, you'll start feeling pure happiness for no reason at all. You'll wake up in the morning filled with joy. Everyday things like eating a meal will feel like incredible experiences because of the peace and ecstasy flowing from within. This is the freedom and beauty that comes from letting go of the mind's limitations. Everything you experience in life can build up inside you, filling you with energy and growth. When you reach a certain point, there's no need to keep listening to the constant chatter of your mind. Imagine being so full of joy or even ecstasy that distracting yourself from it would seem absurd. Why would you do that? And once you realize this, you'll naturally stop doing it. How do you get there? By not letting your mind control you. For instance, when your mind gives you practical advice like, there's a double line on the road, don't pass, you can say, thanks for the reminder, and move on. But when it drags you into unnecessary drama like, remember when your mum told you not to do this and you felt hurt? You simply let it go. You don't need to hold on to every thought or memory. It's not helpful. The past is over. It's gone. You don't need to keep personalizing and revisiting it. Worrying about what might happen in the future doesn't help either. Think about it. How many times have you worried about something that never actually happened? Probably a lot. All that worrying just wastes your time and energy. Eventually, you'll realize that most of the things you're afraid of will never come to pass. So, why spend your life worrying when you could spend it enjoying the moment instead? Here's the truth. First, if something difficult does happen, you can handle it. Why? Because you won't have made such a mess inside your mind and heart that you're overwhelmed. Second, when you're filled with joy, what happens outside matters less because that joy sustains you from within. This is how you can start to understand your mind. There's the big, impersonal mind, a vast and beautiful space for creativity and exploration. And then there's your personal mind, the part that worries, doubts, and overthinks. That personal mind doesn't really help. It often just complicates things and makes life harder. For example, when it comes to love, the personal mind might say, "What if I get hurt again? What if I can't trust them? What if they let me down?" That kind of thinking keeps you from fully experiencing love. Instead, you could say, "I love feeling love. If I get hurt, I'll handle it. I'd rather feel love than waste my time on fear or anxiety." Wouldn't you rather feel love than worry? To change, you need to learn how to observe your mind. Don't fight it, yell at it, or try to suppress it. Just understand that you created this mind. You built it by storing all your experiences, emotions, and fears. At first, you might feel trapped by it. Then, you might want to get rid of it altogether. Over time, though, you'll learn to witness it calmly and recognize, "I built this. I pushed all that stuff down there." Eventually, you'll even feel compassion for your mind. You might apologize to it for burying so much inside it. You'll start to work with your mind instead of against it, letting go of the old baggage you've been carrying. It's not always easy. Letting go of past pain can feel like going through a soul birth. Painful, but necessary for growth. This process is what growth really looks like. It's not about avoiding pain, but about letting it pass through you so you can heal. As you grow, you'll see the mind for what it truly is. A beautiful, boundless energy that can create, explore, and imagine freely. So, where do you want to go today? Microsoft's slogan captures it well. Your mind is a tool, not a trap. Use it to create and expand, not to hold yourself back. And remember, you are so much more than your personal mind. You have the power to let go, grow, and embrace life fully. Thank you for listening.